I've got 5:59 on my computer.
I do as well.
But we are live streaming and recording, so as soon as it hits 6 o'clock, we are ready to go.
And Susan, I don't know if you see anyone else that needs to be brought in. They can raise their hand and we can pull them in for this work session.
Is that Ken Burke with his hand raised?
I do see a Ken, so if it's that's the interview for 6:45.
And Sean Johnson is a rec commission member.
Sean Johnson.
We'll get Sean in there.
All right. I am sorry, I'm having difficulty with my camera. It's telling me my camera is not powered, but it's just part of my computer. So I don't know. My computer's having a problem with the video camera. So oh, there I am.
There you
Okay.
are.
Hopefully it'll stay that way. It is now 6 o'clock, so we can get started with our work session. Item 1 is a discussion of Saugatucket Park Improvement Project with representatives of the Economic Development Committee, Recreation Commission, and Planning Board. I'm not exactly sure who wants to lead this conversation. Does it make sense maybe to have Jamie Rabbit sort of lay the groundwork, or what do you suggest, Terry?
Sure, I think Jamie or is Brian Wagner here? Brian's down at, there he is. Brian, you want to give an overview from the EDC perspective?
Yeah, from the EDC perspective, I mean, this goes back quite a ways to a old URI study done looking at the river and its interactions with Main Street, and some proposals to improve the park. And while investigating that, the EDC, with help from Richard Youngin at the Historic District Commission, discovered that Saugatucket Park actually was designed by fairly famous landscape architects, the Olmsted firm related to Frank Law Olmsted. And they have worked to put together some ideas for bringing back some of the missing attributes of the original Olmsted design, improving the park, tying it into some recreational improvements that are already underway through the recreation department, tying in a little stormwater management as well, and hopefully using this as something to attract people to the historic downtown Wakefield area and drive some pedestrian foot traffic through the park and around onto to Main Street to assist the merchants out there. I think in a brief nutshell, that's it.
Great, thank you, Brian.
Perfect, Brian.
Yeah, just as a follow-up to Brian, I know Larry's here as the chair of the Economic Development Commission. I know they have a full presentation for you this evening by Susan Marcus and Randy Collins. So if Larry would want to do a lead into that, and then I'm sure Susan is fully prepared to start.
Yep. Thank you, Jamie. I want to first thank all the people that have worked on this.
Wait, Larry, can I just interrupt you and say that Randy is having trouble getting on? Is there any way we can figure that out? Because we won't be ready if he's not showing the slides. Susan Flynn, do you see Randy Collins?
No, we don't see him right now.
No, we do not see him in the attendees.
Susan,
All he
can you-
needs to do is log on to Zoom and join the meeting using the code on the front of the agenda.
Right, well, I just resent it to him and he said he got it, so Anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt, Larry, but
No
we won't,
problem.
I'll be talking to you without
Is-
slides if he doesn't come
Is
along.
he, would he be showing up as beta admin?
Yes, he is
Yes.
beta.
Okay,
Yes,
okay.
Okay, I'll let
Great.
him in.
okay. Thank you.
All right.
Sorry to interrupt, Larry.
No problem, Susan, anytime. While he gets on, I don't think I can think of in the 30 years or so I've been involved in the town, a project that has come before the council that is from almost just every board and committee that the town has. I mean, I'd like to thank Terry Murphy for her help. Dave Palazetti, my counterpart with the rec committee, and Will Litman from the rec committee, Rex Everly as staff and an expert in historical park reservations. Paul Jordan and Maria Mack from the planning board, Rich Youngkin from the history committee, Susan Marcus from our committee with Brian Smith and Joanne Esposito, who worked on this, Randy Collins as our expert in engineering of this type, but also the 70 stakeholders, landowners, business owners of Main Street and the surrounding area of the Saugatucket Park that took time out of their busy schedule to come to our open public hearing meeting, I should say, at the CTC. And what you're going to see in the presentation tonight is a culmination of everything that we heard, saw, and we see as a vision for the park and the Saugatucket River. And that's enough from me. I'd like to turn it over to Susan Marcus and Randy Collins for the presentation. Thank you.
Susan, you're muted.
Sorry. I just got finished telling you I was the designated speaker. I better start over. So I'm Susan Marcus. I'm the designated speaker on behalf of the EDC, and I'm going to give you a quick overview of the recent past and how we got to tonight. In the background material you got before tonight's meeting, we gave you the context and structure of that EDC meeting that Larry just mentioned that we held in September. You also got a note from Rich Youngkin on the significance, the extraordinary significance of having an Olmsted Brothers designed park in the center of Wakefield. In the interest of time, I'm not going over any of that material again. The Economic Development Committee has been thinking about what it can do to help our community achieve its greatest potential. And we thank you for the chance to share with you our ideas and to solicit your support. We're in 2020, South Kingstown received a state-funded grant for improvements to the Saugatucket Park. Over the past year, the Rec Commission and the EDC and interested volunteers have collaborated on a plan with both shorter and long-term goals that weaves the Rec's specific intentions to restore elements of the Olmsted Park with the EDC's economic and social vision. For our purposes tonight, we're focused on downtown Wakefield, its Main Street, the Saugatucket Park, and the segment of the Saugatucket River that flows between the two. But many of the ideas we'll raise apply to the entire town. Think, for instance, of another EDC project, Old Tower Hill Road. Likewise, when we mention Main Street, that's shorthand for the commercial streets throughout the downtown. From the beginning of the 20th century, lots of interested citizens have had a vision for increasing the vibrancy of South Kingstown by linking the river, the park, and downtown. As this selective timeline suggests, these efforts began with the purchase of the land for the park with that group of landscape architects over there on the left, But it's continued through the construction of the River Walk on the east bank, Sari Sanctuary on the west bank, and to the northern edge of the area we're talking about tonight, the bike path. And now upcoming, we have 2 anniversary celebrations that should motivate us to rejuvenate our activities. As you know, that the EDC held a public meeting at the Contemporary Theater on a glorious fall afternoon on September 21st. The meeting gave attendees the chance to examine Parks and Rec's current plans. No, you can go into the next one, that one. Yeah, thanks. Gave attendees the chance to examine Park and Rec's current plans to upgrade the Saugatucket Park, to hear about the unfolding SNEP project, more on that in a minute, and to talk among themselves about their aspirations for enhancing the park, the river, and Main Street. Some 70 people showed up, and I'm going to give you a quick roll call. Friends of the Saugatucket, Wakefield Village Merchants, the Chamber, South County History Center, Hera Gallery, the Contemporary Theater, which was also our host, Salt Pond Coalition, URI's Water Watch. In addition, as Larry mentioned, several town committees sent representatives, BPAC, Conservation, Historic District, Rec, Sustainability. Building and business owners came too, and many people who were just curious joined as well. After listening to the presentation, we gathered at tables on the terrace to talk. I just want to say these informal conversations weren't long enough or focused enough or even intended to produce policies or programs. They were designed for freewheeling and brainstorming, drawing on our collective interest in our community. We all functioned as facilitators by sharing our views, listening to those of others. I think we came away with a renewed sense of happiness that we live in such a vibrant community. And now here's the first slide of a little photo essay of what was said. We like to buy our coffee and ice cream on Main Street, and we cherish a strong sense of place. We congregate on the Saugatucket River for river fire, where we also look for turtles with our kids. We value our cultural resources, and here we point to just 2, the Hera Gallery and again the Shakespeare Theater, the Contemporary Theater. And then we own businesses and buildings on Main Street, and we want them to thrive. In the process, we also worry about stormwater and flooding. And finally, I think we're concerned about our kids and the passing on of our love for this place onto them. So after establishing a solid base of what we collectively value, we turned our attention to what we need to do to achieve our greatest potential. So this is the beginning of your little economic development lecture. Economic opportunity flows from one's assets. The more unique and authentic those assets are, the better. We want to focus on 3 main assets tonight. You see them there in the slide. 1, the park, originally designed by the leading landscape architecture firm of the period, that also created some of America's most iconic parks, such as Central Park in New York City and the Necklace in Boston. We also have a historic downtown over there on the right. It's the only main street in the state that borders on an Olmsted Park. And in the middle, we have the river that flows between them. We're here to advocate for renewed investment in those assets to achieve their highest value, for maintaining them in part by drawing on our dedicated citizens, for using these assets to showcase our talents and values, and for explicitly acknowledging how they interact and how we interact with them and each other. So let's quickly go through a short list of how that can be done. We're calling this project or presentation River plus Park plus Main Street, because the asset combo that grows as it builds. Done collectively, those plus signs could become multiplication symbols. Randy Collins will highlight some opportunities in the park in a minute. In the coming months, the SNEP team will report out on some ideas for the river. But first, we're going to fly past some Main Street facades without forgetting that inside those Main Street buildings, existing and maybe some infill to come in the future, we can address changes in usage, more housing for upscale condos, but also rentals so that, say, a nurse or a URI graduate can afford to live in town. And maybe even in the process to rethink the way we use retail and office space. So here is one of the ways in which that combo of the river, park, and Main Street could be made manifest. On the left is a concept of a building plaque. It shows a building photo, and beneath that, a brief description of whatever it makes that building interesting. And then it ends with a map that shows where the building is, shows the river, and when we get when it moves out of concept and into a real design, we'll put the park in there too. But this is a quick assessment of what that multiplying impact is, and it goes something like this in colloquial speak. You buy your ice cream on Main Street, you walk past buildings with plaques, you realize there's a river adjacent, and you cross over to the park. We appreciate enormously that the town council has earmarked some funds from the American Rescue Plan Act for plaquing that might make this possible. And here's a case study. Next slide, Randy. Here is a case study in the idea of getting the highest value out of our assets that we need to preserve as much authentic character as possible. This applies to the Olmsted Park restoration as well, but more on that later. Arnold Lumber has put its own money into restoring its building facade. It hired a local builder, Sweener, who did the job so well that it won a state award in 2015. We appreciate again that the town council has earmarked some funds from the American Rescue Plan Act for facade restoration. With some design and procedural guidelines, opportunities like these could be available for other building owners. We can plan activities for storytelling and mutual learning. We can design interpretive signage for sighting around town. Signs might include such things as highlighting Indigenous populations' ongoing contributions to our understanding of this place we love, explaining the Industrial Revolution's impact on the river and our commercial development, noting the role the railroads played in bringing the first tourists from the main line to the beach, and explaining perhaps the importance of a watershed. With the 300th anniversary coming up, we can celebrate our historical assets with each of these types of investments. We have other types of investments as well that would rebound with opportunities, if developed, to reach their fuller potential. Our natural resources, for example, if we were to address water quality degradation with some investments in green infrastructure, we could get rid of aquatic invasives. If we controlled other invasives along the banks, we could gain views across the river. We might even see a blue heron. If we undertake these investments in a way that explains to the public what's going on, we might interest high schoolers and the next generation more broadly in becoming freshwater chemists, green infrastructure engineers, or arborists. Then there are our recreational assets that with some investment of creative energy could be more vital. Take the bike path. With some more intentionality, it could fuel business opportunities for a more recreational economy. It's a transit asset connecting Amtrak to URI to the Narragansett Beach, and along the way, the schools, the Guild, the library, Peacedale, and Wakefield. Again, the American Rescue money has set aside, I think, some money for wayfinding systems, and they might be used along this path to seed a public-private partnership to clarify what you can get to using the path. And don't forget the multiplier effect. As we walk and ride the path, we get healthier and happier. Finally, for tonight's catalog of our assets, we return to our community with its deep pockets of knowledge and committed citizenry. The EDC will continue to arrange opportunities for people to be involved in imaging and creating the future. The picture on the left is from, the picture on the left is from 2016, when URI Professor Will Green's Landscape Architecture Senior Studio conducted the original town charrette, collecting people's thoughts on how to develop our river plus park plus Main Street potential. Now, I know the metaphor you're probably thinking right now is, oh my gosh, a tangled skein of wool. All the threads are interwoven: river and park and Main Street, restoration, recreation, natural resources, economic resilience, community activism, generational handoff, pride of place. So we made a word cloud created from the words that people wrote on the Post-it notes written on the tables at that September meeting. It might be hard to untwine the conversation into one straight line because everything leads to something else. But I'm going to turn it over to Randy Collins now, who will help you draw that straight line. And I think we end with one slide, the next one. Oh, and I forgot to mention the story maps. You have this in your, you have that reference in your, the story maps. You should check that out. You have that in the package of information that we handed out to you. You might find that interesting. So just in closing, let me just repeat. Next slide. That the way we are going to achieve our greatest potential is to build an economy that's based on our strengths and promotes our assets. Thank you. Okay, Randy, over to you.
Thanks, Susan. And so what I'd like to do is focus in on one of our assets, Saugatucket Park. The town has already made a commitment to make improvements to the park as part of the rec department's the funding that they receive from DEM. We also are working closely with the SNEP network on stormwater and habitat restoration. And then of course, there is the restoration of Saugatucket Park itself. So the Rec Commission's grant that they received from Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management and with the town's match includes path of improvements, replacing the basketball court and providing a pickleball court as well, removal of invasive species on the slope of the river, and replacement of the existing chain link fence with an existing ornamental fence. In that photograph that you can see just to the left of the path, that's the fence covered in vines. So think about an attractive ornamental fence in its place, but also think about the removal of those vines and what kind of views could be opened up to the river and to the downtown. As I mentioned, there's the SNEP network's technical assistance that's ongoing. They're looking at riparian buffer restorations over at the Indian Run Brook at the Guild. And then we're also investigating stormwater solutions at Saugatucket Park that might help with not just the park, but also High Street. As Susan was saying, the park was designed by the Olmsted brothers, son of Frederick Law Olmsted, whose 200th birthday is being celebrated this year. The park features that are included in the Saugatucket Park originally are the path, there was lighting, benches were discussed, there are plantings, there were edge treatments along High Street. The plans actually show a wall there, but we're also been envisioning some trees to create that edge. And then views to the park and from the park, from High Street, the river, and the downtown. And we're also considering, as I mentioned earlier, the stormwater elements. And one of the most important things to point out is in the design concept that the Olmsted brothers had was to really have the unifying effect of the river, the downtown, and the park, and the river being that unifier. In trying to understand how to restore the park properly, there was a lot of work done to uncover the numerous plans, photographs, letters, and newspaper articles. This is an article from 1936. The highlighted bottom part of the newspaper is a discussion about this Saugatucket Park and the local citizens who sort of banded together to acquire the land and fund the design. And the snippet of this article that's in the bottom left of the slide is a discussion on how this group asked the town council to prepare and pass an ordinance to create a South Kingstown Parks Commission. The research into discovering these many documents was done by Rich Youngkin. They're invaluable to understanding the nature of the park, how it was designed, the features that they were highlighting, and the overall idea behind the park's relationship to the river and the downtown. Here are a few photographs of the park under construction in 1935. You can see on the left photograph the path in the foreground leading out to the background, and you can see the bank of the river. You can see it's relatively cleared in this photograph. And so that high point looking up, looking down from the park into the river and across to the downtown was a very significant feature of the design. Would be nice to have some views opened up, maybe not nearly as many or as wide open as the photograph on the left would suggest, but that's one of the things that we want to pay attention to. And then the long view of the park from the school facing the intersection of High Street and Main Street. In reviewing a lot of these documents, we came to understand the park features that were part of the overall design. The plan that you see on the left is sort of a working document. It's very much was the plan that was the design was based on, but the hand note that you see under the title block of that is that these are field notes and also a lighting study from the designer. And it's important to point out in the lighting study that there was actually lighting that was considered and installed as part of the parks project. And then you see one of the letters from Brennan Helm, who was the resident, and I'm forgetting exactly what his, I think he was a parks director. There were numerous pages of letters that were very interesting to read through to get an insight on the park's design, and also the town's local citizens who were promoting and that design. I mentioned some of the elements of the park. There were benches, plantings, and lighting. In one of the newspaper articles, as well as in some of the letters, there is mention of the light that was installed in the park, installed on a cedar post. And it was suggested in the letter that it would be very much like the light that's at the Wellesley campus up in Wellesley, Mass. And that is a photograph of that light on the right side. While this light you see is on a shepherd's crook, we would envision the light being on a post, possibly not a cedar post, thinking about long-term maintenance and durability, but certainly wanting to consider the light being an important aspect of the park project. There also was numerous mentions of benches and some details in benches, and we're thinking it would be a relatively simple bench, much like the photograph on the left. And then there was planting information that was included in the plans as well. So here's a view, existing conditions plan of the park. And then this is the view of what we are hoping to accomplish with the restoration. You can see the dash lines. That's the current footprint of the paths as they exist today. You can see, for the most part, the paths coincide closely with the existing conditions. And there are a number of places where we would like to make some changes to meet that restoration goal of being able to bring this back to the original design from the Olmsted brothers. So if you can see the H in High Street, you see there's a spur of the path that now goes down a little further than where it currently exists, which is under the 2 E's in street. In the same location, you can see a number of street trees that would be proposed to try to reinforce that edge that was important from the documents that we were reviewing. There is lighting, kind of hard to read on here, and there would be benches that would also be placed within the park, meeting the original design from the Olmsted brothers. So everybody's very curious about what all this might cost. The Saugatucket Park restoration, a planning level estimate would put it at about $445,000. A significant component of that is lighting. The lighting would have to meet current codes and guidelines. So, and, thinking about, as I mentioned, a more durable post and matching up with the lamp that is similar to the one at Wellesley, that number is between $180,000 and $200,000. The other components made up of this includes the benches and the plantings and some other work that could help that would restore the natural character, as well as opening up some views to the river. So this could be done in pieces, but I would say that if there were a way to combine efforts on the Parks and Recs project, which they're hoping to construct in this summer, and possibly be able to come up with funds for the lighting to be potentially placed as part of that project. Once that project would be done in the fall of this year, you would have pretty much the backbone and most of the body of the restoration completed. One of the other things that we think are important, and this is thinking about the big picture of grants, not just for the river, the park, as well as the downtown area, but the town in general, is to be able to have a membership to Main Street America. It's only a $350 a year membership. And maybe more importantly, to hire a grants coordinator writer that really can take advantage of the numerous funds and grants that are out there, whether they're historic grants, environmental grants, community restoration grants, Main Street grants. There are a whole lot of potential funds that a grant writer that is working hard would be able to get for the town for all these various projects. And oftentimes, I think it's important to point out, a lot of the grants that can be pursued actually have a portion of the money being placed to fund that grant writer. And then there are some additional projects that we're looking at in the future, and that is to connect the bike path to Saugatucket Park, something that is in the very early stages of discussion. We're waiting for the SNEP recommendations to come out on what they view would be the important aspects and how to approach dealing with stormwater along High Street and in the park. And then the potential, once the park is upgraded, is really turning our attention over to the parking lot and making some significant improvements there as well. So that's it. That's all I have. Then that's the presentation, and happy to have any questions or comments that we can open it up to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy and Susan. It was great to hear that overview. Do we want to start with questions from town council members? It's been so long since I've used Zoom. How do I get the list of attendees on the right again? Oh, there are participants. Okay.
I'll maybe just have unshare the screen so we can see more people. I don't know who's sharing. Thank you.
All right. So anybody have any questions or comments to begin? Jessica Rose.
A quick question, and this is, and maybe details that you haven't gotten to yet. One of the things that stands out to me is that chain link fence being replaced with something more ornate and appropriate styled. What's to prevent? I loved that picture that you showed of the clear sight lines from the 1930s, and I think that an ornate fence would really complement that. What would, though, prevent the invasives from growing back and harming a new fence? When I walked the site not long ago, and it is just, it's crawling with invasives. It's unbelievable how many invasives are there and how overwhelmed the river edge is with those. So is that something that you've thought about so far, or is it too early for that?
No, it has been thought of. I think the simplest answer for that is ongoing maintenance. Once we get those views opened up and we've cleared out the invasives, you're right, they're going to try to come back. And so there's going to have to be probably an ongoing effort of maintaining those views. But I think one of the things that will come out of the projects is once those views are opened up and those the fences removed and all the vines that are growing on it, and people see those views, you can really start to get a sense of you know, how folks might want to interact with the river view wise, and they'll want to maintain those views.
Yeah, I know there have been some community members who are doing like voluntary cleanups of other trails and sites. So, I think maybe reaching out to some of those people and pulling them in, I think they would be so interested to help with this, because it really is, it has the potential to be so, it's beautiful now, but to have those clear sight lines, that's really something. Thank you.
Rory?
Susan and Randy, excellent job with the presentation here. Very informative. I'm totally on board and 100% agree with the philosophy here on the river plus park plus Main Street. I think it's the best way to try to utilize our local assets. I got a question for you, Terry Murphy. As to the $445,000 that they're requesting here, is that something we could potentially fit into the capital improvement program that we'll be voting on tonight? And if so, how would that kind of work for us here?
So I think to back up just a bit, Councilman McEntee, there is detail on the Saugatucket Park long-term improvement program in the capital budget. As it exists now, it's showing $190,000, right? Most of that is the current grant and matching funds and the year-end transfer that occurred at the end of this year. It's a council decision in terms of prioritizing long-term projects or immediate projects. I will also note that there is some, as I think it was Susan or Randy pointed out, some of the funding within the American Rescue Plan framework calling for lighting. There's a total of $400,000 in the amended plan. Whether or not that's something that the council wants to consider identifying a specific place such as Saugatucket Park for some of that funding, that could potentially be a consideration the council may want to have. I would also mention that the council would need to decide whether they wanted to add a couple $100,000 more dollars to the capital improvement program as it stands now, or they would have to consider reallocating. I will also say that there is a priority project underway with the Recreation Commission in terms of how they prioritize their park projects. And you're all aware of the old Mountain Field project that has been in the pipeline for several years. So certainly up to the council. I would say that there are rescue plan dollars with relation to lighting, benches, wayfinding, that have already been identified in the broad sense for those types of things. It's whether or not you want to specify Saugatucket Park as a specific priority for those items.
Got it. Thank you, Terry.
Councilwoman Kelson.
So I just have a couple of questions. What does SNAP stand for?
Southern New England Estuaries Program. Or it's actually Southern New England Program Network. The network is at the end. That's what SNAP stands for. It's part of the EPA's Region 1 group. I actually had the website pulled up so I could answer that question if need be.
Okay, no, I can look, I can do some research myself on it. I just was curious as to what it stood for. How about bench adoption? So you threw out a figure for how costly the benches would be, but a bench adoption program would cover that, I would think. And you can always put a time on the longevity of that, right? Like say, okay, you can sponsor this bench for 10 years or 15 years or whatever you decide the life cycle of that bench is, and then people can re-up or not. So I'd like to see that. I'd also like to see us look at the APRA funds to advance this. I think that's the best place for us at this point. That's all.
Thank you, Deb. Councilwoman Bergner.
Thank you, Abel. Susan and Randy, that was a fantastic presentation. I was hoping maybe at some point we could edit down just your presentation to the slides and put it on the website so people could understand what the whole project is and your vision. I think it was really just magical, like your word choice and how you explain it. I think anyone would be very excited about it. I know I love this project. I think it's going to be just a showstopper for the center of Main Street and our community. I would like to agree. I agree with Deb Kelso that we do need to prioritize this, and using rescue funds is definitely the way to go. I definitely think when people say, what are you going to do with your $9 million? We can say, we did that, right there. And people can say, oh, it's beautiful, it's worthwhile. I didn't really think about the benches, but I think sponsoring the benches is also a great idea. But also I wanted to add, my friend lives in Simsbury, Connecticut, and they adopt a flower box. And so her husband bought it for her, and they maintain a box on the bridge. So, I mean, there's ways that we can bring community members forward to be more involved in this project, from the very small to the very big. I don't know what we need to do to prioritize this project so that you can move forward quickly. I do also think finding a grant writer is probably going to be a priority, because I think there's money to get, and we could possibly leverage some of our rescue funds to get, say, the wayfinding of their historical signs, which I loved. I loved everything that Susan Marcus said about why this project could be, a multiplier rather than just River plus Park plus Main Street. I looked at it as the multiplier. So what can we do? I'm ready to do it.
Thank you, Deb. I guess my comment just follows right on top of that. What are the next steps? I know we have sort of this collaboration of committees right here approaching us with this option for funding. And I know that we've already approved a budget for the rescue plan funds, and this fits very well within all that plan. But what do we need to do next? Is there a resolution that needs to be passed at a council meeting authorizing this spending? Does that have to come out of a department, or what do we do next? Terry.
I think, to everyone's point, this it's fabulous. The collaboration, these boards aren't working in silos. They're working together. I do think that if you are focused on Saugatucket Park, that the recommendation, the funding request needs to probably come through the Recreation Commission, just so that there's a consistent, purview oversight of the park project. And since there's already a long-term plan established within the CIP, it may make sense to be able to modify that in terms of alternative funding, so you're not having to shift the capital improvement program, but you're simply formally committing funds from the rescue plan based on what you've already approved in the framework with lighting and benches and those types of things, that there can be a recommendation from the Rec Commission with a detail of the outline of the program with the additional funding, to say, here's the revised long-term plan based on the fact that there's more funding available, and that this is a collaborative effort by multiple boards and commissions to accelerate this program. I'd also add that Joanne Esposito is here this evening. While she's on the EDC, she's also the chair of the 300th Anniversary Steering Committee. I know there's specific intentions to try to generate, and Joanne, you may chime in, a legacy project of sorts in line with the 300th anniversary, whether everything gets completed prior to, but that there's a commitment made to enhance the park, to bring it back to its historic kind of origins. Joanne, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
Oh, no, thanks, Terry. Hi, everyone. This is, as Larry said, this is like the perfect, wonderful storm where we're all collaborating. And then, of course, the town's having their 300th anniversary. And one of the major things that we felt that the steering committee needed to come out of this anniversary next year for the celebration is that we have something that's tangible afterwards to celebrate. You know, similar to wonderful monuments and water fountains and artwork in Europe and all around the country and the world. We need something that marks the 300th anniversary. And one of the things with this project and the whole Saugatucket area, this is going to be big, and this could really impact and show that we're, you know, we're investing in our assets, and that's really great. The 300th anniversary committee is looking to put together projects, commemorative projects, including an artwork of some sort where we, you know, seek artists. We thought to have a river cleanup so we could combine it with the park Rex invasive, where it's all hands on deck, and then, you know, from there it goes into the further pulling away the invasives. But we could work together, and it's just perfect timing, and I'm glad to see all the collaboration.
Joanne. All right, well, we actually have just hit 6:45, which is according to our agenda when this meeting ends, or this work session item ends. Any closing thoughts from, I guess the next thing we're waiting for at the town council level is just, you know, being approached by the Rex Commission and perhaps an RFP going out for an architect firm to begin this work.
From an EDC perspective, I think the rec committee is where the money should be, and we're not looking to control anything here. We're an advisory commission. We'd like to be able to be involved in the vision, but handing over control is not what we do. You know, we're all set with that. And I think that this is, I want to remind everybody, I think it's the first step, because we need to start working on the other side of Main Street and the portion of the park over there and the water runoff over there. We need to tie in the bike path and behind the school and clean that area up and tie it all together. So this would be a great first step with great timing with the 300th. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for everybody's tirelessly, and it's been tirelessly, amount of effort that they've put in from all the different committees and your time tonight. I thank you for the 45 minutes you gave us.
Thank you, Larry. And thank you, everybody, for coming and for the presentation. Looking forward to the next steps. At this time, we'll move into interviews. We have a couple. First is Kenny Burke in attendance.
Abel, he is here.
Okay. He wants to be reappointed to the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee.
Yep, he is here. I see him, he's still a panelist. You should be
There he is.
seeing him as the screen gets smaller. You'll be able to see people more clearly.
All right, welcome back, Kenny. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience so far? Thank you for your ongoing updates that you've been giving us during your time. It's been great to see your leadership there. I know there's a lot of work to continue doing, but tell us about your experience and why you want to keep doing it.
Yeah, thank you, Council President. It's been a great several years, actually. As you know, we are chartered to be an advisory committee to the council. And we had the daunting task to basically create a master plan for bicycle and pedestrian issues throughout town. We felt a strong part of that would include site-specific improvements throughout town through the various villages. And part of that success hinges on strong public engagement. And then, enter COVID and the pandemic. So we have made some great strides in terms of a great inaugural working document. But the committee as a whole feels like we really need to get out and start meeting with the public to validate some of our assumptions, to make modifications as local residents see fit, and then eventually to bring that back to the council for your further consideration for implementation. And it is kind of a labor of love. I do enjoy it, and I'd respectfully ask your consideration to continue to serve.
Any questions? Rory.
Ken, always great to see you. I'd just like to say, follow on what Abel said, we appreciate your leadership on that board there. It's pretty clear. You keep us regularly updated all the time, and that's kind of rare to an extent from all the committees anyway, but we appreciate all the work you do, and I can't see why we wouldn't reappoint you here. So thank you for all the work you do.
All right. Any other questions for Ken? All right, seeing none, thank you for coming back before us, Ken. We'll let you know. We'll let you know in short order. And that brings us to our candidate for the Affordable Housing Collaborative. Is George Helwig in attendance? George, if you are the telephone number that is called in, you can raise your hand by hitting *9. Or if you're one of these other folks listed in the participants, hit that raise hand button. Okay, I see Nadine. Oh, wait.
Susan, it looks like it might be Nadine Sally. They just raised their hand again, but.
Yeah, I think they've been.
Yes, they're
brought
coming
in.
in now.
All right, George, is that you? You just need to unmute yourself. There.
Okay, now I get your, yes.
All right, well, welcome and thank you for putting your name into consideration for the Affordable Housing Collaborative. Tell us what inspired you to throw your hat in the ring.
Actually, I'm new to town. I moved in about a year ago, and I just wanted to get involved in the community. I have spent about 15 years in affordable housing. Prior to that, I was in consumer lending and banking. And I've also served on planning and zoning boards in New Hampshire, where I came from. So I'm just interested in that part of it. I've done training for consumers, first-time home buyers, things like that. And I also have actually built some affordable housing with nonprofits I've worked for. So it's just it's a field that I'm very interested in.
Sounds like a great match. Any questions for George?
I don't have any questions. I just want to say welcome, George.
Oh, thank you.
I think we're happy to have you apply for this board. Sounds like a great fit to me. So thank you very much for taking an interest.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, very good. I know, George, we've been doing a lot of work on affordable housing locally, and it's going to continue to be a pressing issue for us here in town. It sounds like you'd be a valuable addition to this.
Yeah, I think it's very important to any community especially in an area where you have to have people that can work at certain wage levels and still afford housing. So,
Exactly. All right. Well, thank you again. We'll let you know.
thank you.
Good night, George. Right, and that brings us session. Right, now looks like we have plenty of time to go over the agenda tonight. Terry, if you'd like to take us through that.
Sure. Starting with licenses, you have items A and B, which are two more of the URI Global Spectrum Class F liquor licenses. Those are for the men's basketball games at the University of Rhode Island. One correction on that, in the last line, it should reflect Kingston Fire District approvals, not Union Fire District approvals. If Susan can confirm that. But otherwise, those are the same as the last two meetings where you've considered and authorized those licenses. Item 7 is our public hearing on the capital improvement program. I'm happy to go through that now, or if there are questions that the council would like to discuss prior to the public hearing, we have time. If there's anything you'd like to discuss at the work session, I'm more than happy to address any items there.
Any questions on the CIP?
Okay, moving on, you have item B under communications. That's a letter from DEM with regard to the Land and Water Conservation Fund and properties within town that fall under this category. And this is a notification that went out to every city and town with regard to their properties that have some type of Land and Water Conservation Fund connection through funding from the state and federal government. And you'll notice that on the third page, you can see the locations within South Kingstown that the town has benefited from funding from the state and federal government for enhancements of park properties. Staff will be involved with this training that DEM is offering. We'll be attending that workshop on February 10th. So we just wanted to make the council aware that that is happening. If there are any questions on that?
So I just have one question. Are they asking for any action other than just a notice of the workshop?
No action. This is a reminder. This is really for municipalities to understand that, and in many places, these grants go back decades. And so it's just really to bring it to cities and towns' attentions that there's dollars associated with properties that now have conservation easements on them because of the funding.
So it's just a reminder really to municipalities that there are limitations on what can happen.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. If we move on, Mike will be giving under the town manager's report, under the solicitor's report, an update on the town manager search. I think that can, unless Mike, you have anything to add now, but I think that can wait. You have one other appointment. There is an application from Susan Barrett to be appointed or considered for appointment on the 300th anniversary steering committee. That opportunity is still open. I believe the committee has left that open until the end of February, and then that'll be closed. Whoever's been appointed, that will constitute the steering committee at that time. So something for the council to consider as well under appointments. Under new business item A, you received a memo from me in terms of a request for funding from the 300th anniversary steering committee. The committee has met twice since they've been established, and now they're starting to get into the planning and development for the the event, which is a year-long event that will take place throughout the year 2023. And there's a request to have the town council consider some seed funding for the project. Obviously, the committee will establish a more defined budget, but there are certainly many layers and levels to what events, programs, projects, workshops that will take place throughout the 2023 year. The committee will be tasked with seeking sponsorships and funding from outside sources as well, including grants, local private sponsorships and the like. But in order to get this moving and off the ground, looking for a $10,000 commitment from the town council in the current year budget to get the project and programs initiated. Right now, the committee is focused on really establishing a branding and some marketing materials to start to get the community excited about 2023. And the recommendation is for $10,000 to be considered allocated from the town council contingency fund. And I believe there's approximately, I want to say $40,000 available in that fund as of this date. Are there any questions on that? Okay, moving on. You have a resolution to authorize the planning department to submit an application to the Rhode Island Historical Preservation and Heritage Commission through the Historic District Commission. And that is to run a training, and that involves a $3,500 in-kind match from the town, which in essence is most likely going to be a facility where the training can be held. But for the most part, the funding for, I believe it's, there's a corrected application. The funding is a $15,000 budget. And they're looking for $10,500 in the federal grant aid, with the match being in-kind support from the town. And so the planning department is looking to be able to submit that application. Again, minimal funding commitment from the town, but a good opportunity for the town to be the host of this training session, which would be a statewide training session as well. So, are there any questions? I do have Brian Wagner here if the council has any questions on that. Moving on to item C. Again, this is another, a similar application, and this is for the South County Art Association. Because the Historic District Commission is the recognized certified local government entity that has to authorize the submittal of these grants, the town needs to sign off on this grant application. Again, there's no financial commitment on behalf of the town. It really is just acknowledging that the South County Art Association has a legitimate reason for applying for this funding, which has to do with a infrastructure painting project that had gone bad and shouldn't have already. It's a historic building, and so they're looking for financial support to be able to discover why the building is in the condition it's in only after a couple of years of having been just newly painted. So the council has that to consider as well. Any questions? Item E is nomination and election of officers of the town council for the remaining of the 2020-2022 term. You're aware of Council President Collins' communication to step down. I don't know, Mike, if you want to advise the council of the process, or Susan.
So when we get to that point, Susan will actually run the election for president, just as we did at the beginning of the term. Once a new president is elected, the president will then, if necessary, run an election for a new vice president. And Susan and I can walk you through that when we get there.
Thank you, Mike. Item F is a recommendation for a resolution authorizing an award of bid to Weston and Sampson for consulting services related to the American Rescue Plan Act projects and framework that the council has approved for a total of $492,800. That includes a $20,000 contingency. As noted in the memo that I had sent to the council, actually, I'm going to ask Susan, would you mind bringing in John Schock and Jamie Rabbit so that we can review this closely in terms of the details surrounding this particular recommendation?
Okay.
And I'll start to go through it, but you'll note that we had 3 bidders. The RFP went out to be able to secure consulting services for an array of expertise in terms of engineering and design services, planning services, architectural services, financial management services, grant management and monitoring services, all related to the projects that had been put forth to the council for the American Rescue Plan funding of $8.95 million. We have had 3 proposals, and of the 3, Weston and Sampson was really the only proposer that made themselves fully familiar with the framework of the projects that the town was considering for execution throughout the next 2-year time frame. They proposed to offer their services along with 3 subcontractors that are specialists in architectural design, financial management, and grant application development and management services. That's the nutshell version of what Weston and Sampson had proposed. They're a local regional vendor out of Foxborough. We have looked at their proposal. If you'll notice in the memorandum, their original bid was certainly not something that we were considering, $1.9 million. When we met with them, we reviewed the scope of work and had them go back and revise their proposal to be able to offer the services that we felt were critical in terms of how we can move forward with executing the variety and number of projects that have been proposed for the American Rescue Plan in South Kingstown. And they came back with a proposal of $472,000. I do have their proposal breakout of how the funding is proposed to be expended, and I think I can share my screen. Let me try to do that. Okay, are you able to see the breakout on the
Yes.
document?
We can
You'll
see.
see that we have $35,560 for financial advisory services, project development services, $220,140, project management services, $89,680, cost tracking, accounting, and reporting services, $47,430, and monitoring services of $78,990. So that is the total of $472,800. Again, this is a very kind of broad contract in terms of what the town would need to really execute the variety of projects that we have listed in the framework for the rescue plan spending. I'd also note that the EMS building, which the council approved for rescue plan dollars, has also been, I can share with you the reallocation of those funds so that you have an idea of what that looks like. Bear with me here 1 second. Okay, so just very high level, what you can see in this, can you see it?
Yes.
The pie chart, you can see the white piece of pie at 1.1 million. How that had been carved out was essentially from various other elements of the entire spending program. So you'll see, if you look at the village and downtown, the blue piece of pie for the public expenditures, you'll see it was originally 4.36 million, and we've adjusted that down to 3.53 million. And around the chart, you can see the village and downtown public-private investment was reduced by $262,500. The nonprofit reduced by $25,000. The housing by $75,000, and the government and municipal investment services by $704,500. All so that we could be sure that the funding for the EMS building was dedicated through the rescue plan dollars. So just so the council has a frame of reference there. I've got John and Jamie here. I know there were some questions related to the 10% conceptual design. If you looked at my recommendation, you'll see that the recommendation was to award for up to 10% conceptual design. And I'd like to have, John, do you want to explain what that means in terms of what we've got proposed?
Sure. So, I mean, this project is very multifaceted, and it's very difficult, unlike a typical engineering contract where we provided a detailed scope of work on what we expect the consultant to do. So we've talked to the consultant and come to agreement that it makes sense for them to come up with 10% concept design, whether it's continued ornamental lighting on Main Street, perhaps ornamental crosswalks or bump outs on Main Street, facade improvements. Their first task is going to try to get the 10% concept designs done. And then once we have buy-in that their concepts are acceptable, we would be back before the council in the future to award a more detailed contract that we would negotiate with them for the detailed design plans and specifications so we can actually get out to bid on some of these projects. So that's how we're envisioning this project, a little different than our traditional engineering services contract. I have dealt with Weston and Sampson in the past on Middlebridge Sewers, Perryville Water Main Extension. They were very capable, and they are a multidiscipline firm that they have, landscape architects and architects on staff. So we don't have to go out for different disciplines with different companies. We can do it all with just one firm. So that's kind of how we got to where we are right now.
And I think, John, am I correct in that the 10% conceptual design we would not be necessarily needing to go back to contract for every project, that we have in-house resources on certain elements that already exist in town that might be an expansion of what's already there?
Correct. So, I mean, for example, like the crosswalks, if we can maybe do enhancements to the downtown crosswalks, we're hoping that they would come up with a typical design. And then we would hopefully take it from there and talk to RIDOT as far as getting the permits in place to have those at whatever locations we decide on Main Street. So we're hoping some of this we can probably move forward in-house rather than having, detailed designs for every single component in the, what we envision to be the final product. But again, we're at 10% or will be at 10%. At that point, we'll have to make some critical decisions on how we get from that point to actually out to bid for whatever the project or improvement is we want to get done.
Thank you, John. And then Jamie, is there anything in terms of particularly the economic recovery, Main Street Village projects that you want to comment on? That is the largest element of the rescue plan framework.
Yeah. Again, looking at the movement from the EMS and that 1.1 million out, we looked at not just a percentage cut across the board. We started there with a 10% across the board, which raised about $900,000, which didn't get us to our goal. So we really looked much closer at each line item contained within those program slots of facade improvements and wayfinding and bus shelters, and really went through an analysis on an Excel spreadsheet of taking bigger chunks from bigger dollar amounts and smaller chunks from smaller ones to come up with that 1.1. And to John's point with Weston and Sampson, their original number, which was significantly higher than their revised proposal, tried to encapsulate and incorporate full design, development of a plan, development of a program to project to construction drawings. And that's, to John's point, there's a lot of things that we can do in-house once they take some of the design to the 10% standards. Saugatucket Park's a perfect example. If they, in their 10% design, showed us a light pole and town council liked the light pole, there's no 90% left to finish. You like the light pole, you can go and do a request. You did that light pole. You don't have to take it to 90% design. You already have the design. The same thing from a bench. If they show you a representative example of a park bench and you like that, that's done at 10%. There's no 90% left. John's example of a crosswalk is perfect. If you design one type of crosswalk and say it's a brick inlay or a stamped asphalt called street pave, you can replicate that 7 times over on 7 different crosswalks, working with DOT and perhaps just using a design detail versus another 90% into design for a crosswalk that's just repeated 7 times in a setting along a mile corridor of land. So again, we worked really closely with Weston and Sampson to refine the scope of services to get it down to something that was more manageable. Typically, the federal government allows you to do 10% administration, just administration on any federal dollars. That's not project development, 10% admin. So the town could take almost $1 million away from this federal initiative and just use it to administer the program. We're at 475. That includes project development from engineers, architects, landscape architects, and urban plannings to help us develop and vet the program with staff, council, and other parties who will be affected by this spend plan.
And not to get into too much more.
3-year time frame.
So the time frame is a critical piece of this. The clock is ticking in terms of the execution of committal of the dollars that the town has received. Currently, I'm aware of one other municipality right now that is currently under contract. That's the city of Providence. What I would also mention is that the deliverables on the various work areas for this bid award are specific. We expect that with a contract of this nature, that Weston and Sampson and their subcontractors will be held to a tight time frame in terms of how they turn around the deliverables so that we can execute the grant program for social service agencies, that we can establish the workshops that need to be had at the different village levels to determine what projects to be done at each location. So those are detailed out in the proposal, and this is the recommendation to the council. So at that.
And Terry, if I could just add one more thing on the pie chart that Terry showed you earlier, there was originally $300,000 contemplated for administration of the program. That was for staff for 3 years. So if you look at that 300,000, that just got you administration of the program. It didn't get any design input or professional help on that side. So the additional dollars is above that 300,000, but that gets you the architectural services, the landscape services, the urban planning and design services, as well as traffic engineering and design.
Go on,
Any
Terry.
questions? Just, I'll put it out there now if the council has questions.
So I just need some clarification. On the pie chart, I saw 800,000 for project management. Is that what you just described to me, Jamie? The 500, close to 500,000 to Weston here, plus the 300,000? What am I looking at in that pie chart?
You're on mute, Jamie.
So that 800,000 is a very conservative number that would take some of the projects potentially outside of that 10% design frame. So there would be another, we'll call it $325,000, not including that 20% contingency that could be available for any project that needed to go to full design. Again, that $800,000 is dedicated to full project management. Terry's recommending a contract right now that does not utilize all of those funds.
Okay, so it's Weston plus whatever else we. What
To
we.
John's point, we don't know.
Right.
What
yes, okay, got it. Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, let's see. Quickly moving on. We also have a memo from John Schock about the streetlight program, and that we are now prepared to transfer ownership and maintenance of all streetlights on state roads currently owned by the town of South Kingstown to the Rhode Island Department of Transportation. So this is the culmination of the streetlight program that John has been working on for at least 2 years, John, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. But these are the documents that we have to execute in order to close the loop on them on the town side. John, do you want to elaborate?
Yep, I can do a little bit. So the council may recall, we actually awarded the contract back to Siemens in 2018. And unfortunately, we've been waiting for literally 3 years for RIDOT to come to agreements, give us some direction on for them taking ownership of the streetlights. We finally came to agreement with them on what they wanted. They would agree to take the streetlights, which are about 30% of our inventory, but first they wanted them converted to LED. We've now completed that conversion. Those streetlights on state roads will simply have a photovoltaic sensor. In other words, on and off at dusk and dawn, whereas the town streetlights will be able to control those lights and dim them down for additional energy savings. So all streetlights have been converted, both town and state. The only thing we're waiting on, is typically like everything else in the world, is COVID. We're waiting on some microchips for our, they call them the gateways. We have 2 gateways out in the town that sends the data back to the cloud that we can control the streetlights with. Those are not, we don't even know when those are going to show up, the microchips. The gateways have been installed. Siemens is pressing hard to try to get those in here, but they have not yet been delivered. The other remaining work is we have the ornamental streetlights on Main Street. We need to convert to LED. Those are a little more problematic because we're trying to preserve the architecture in those I guess, the globes that have the glass patent in them. That's been a little more difficult. We think now we can actually change the lamps and not the whole fixture, but we're working with Siemens on that. They have 2 lamps coming in. We're gonna do as a pilot to see how those look. And again, even those lamps are gonna be delayed with COVID. So those are really the only remaining things we have to be completed. Other than, this is important, getting these, as soon as we get these lights over to RIDOT, we're gonna shave 30% off our bills, because our National Grid bills, because 30% of the inventory is on state roads. So we're gonna go, I think I've got in the memo there, we went originally, I think, from like $200,000 a year, we're gonna end up down around 50 by the time we're done for streetlights, not including any maintenance that we have to go out and do, but the savings are substantial.
Excellent. Thank you, John.
And just finally, there's on the consent agenda, item H is the authorizing of an order of public notice on a hearing for the Class J liquor license. This is also related to Global Spectrum for the University of Rhode Island. Just wanted to bring it to the council's attention that that will be advertised for public notice and a public hearing in February. And that will be under consideration. This is the first time I believe the council has considered a Class J liquor license.
Thank you, Terry. Any questions on the agenda then? Just one quick question, Terry, on communications item 8A. There's an email from Jonathan Daly of Lavelle concerning school facilities. I was contacted by a couple other folks who had written letters on the same subject and were wondering why they weren't included. I told them it could just be that, you know, Susan was on vacation, not everything made it onto the agenda in a timely manner, but probably to expect it in the future meeting to show up.
I'm not, I understand there are 2 communications that weren't on because they were, as I understand it, I think they were addressed to the school committee. Are those the communications that?
I guess they might be. I don't really know. They were wondering, since we were all copied on them, I guess they felt like they should be on our agenda.
Okay. Mike, I don't know, do you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I thought because it was basically addressed to the school committee and not firstly to the council, that it wouldn't appear on the agenda, or at least that was my advice. Obviously, any member of the council can put anything they want on the agenda if they want to, but.
No, I was just, they were seeking clarification on why.
All right, so
they
I
want to
think it
have
was
something.
mainly school committee business, basically.
Yeah. All right. If there are no other questions or comment, we have 3 minutes before 7:30. I guess we can have a very short recess, a glass of water or whatnot, and we'll see everybody back here in 3 minutes. All right, everybody. All right, well, we're all here. So let us begin. I would like to welcome everybody to this meeting of the South Kingstown Town Council. It is Monday, January 24th. The time is 7:30. Our first order of business, as always, is the pledge to the flag. Susan, would you mind leading us in that?
Good evening. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Now, I'd like to read our land acknowledgement, which states the town of South Kingstown pays homage to the indigenous people and land on which the town is now located. Let this acknowledgement serve as a reminder of our ongoing efforts to recognize, honor, reconcile, and partner with the Narragansett tribe, whose land and water we benefit from today. All right, and Susan, will you please take the roll?
Council President Collins.
Here.
Council Vice President McEntee.
Here.
Councilwoman Bergner.
Here.
Councilwoman Kelso.
Here.
Councilwoman Rose.
Here.
All members are present.
Thank you. Item 4 is the approval of minutes of previous meetings, but tonight there are none. So I will move us right on to item 5, the consent agenda.
Rory McEntee, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Tess Rose, I'll second.
So moved. Is there any discussion? Is there anyone opposed? All right, that motion carries unanimously. Item 6, licenses. These are both for the same reason, so I'll take them together. 6A and B, resolutions granting Class F 19-hour beverage licenses to Global Spectrum LP, doing business as Spectra Venue Management for URI men's basketball games, Saturday, February 12th and Monday, February 14th. These are both from 5 p.m. to 11 p.m. at the Thomas Ryan Center, 1 Lincoln Plaza, Kingston, RI. Application by Mario Martone. There he is. Welcome back, Mario.
Thank you.
And hopefully this may be the last time you need to go through this process, but tell us how it's been going in the intervening time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I apologize, Leah Becky, who has been with me at the other council meeting, she actually is dealing with something at the Ryan Center. I believe they had a pipe that burst, so she is dealing with that. I did speak to her before this hearing. So far, they have utilized the Class F 4 times. They're getting a great response. People really seem to be happy about it. There have been absolutely no issues. I'm happy to report. And you know, their hope is that there will continue to be no issues. You know, I think my understanding is they're doing it exactly the way that we explained, and our hope is that, you know, it will continually going well. But she did say that people seem to be happy that that additional service is available, and I think people are taking advantage of it, but being responsible about it.
Very good, Mario. Any questions at this time? If not, do I hear a motion?
Rory McEntee, I'll make a motion to approve 6A and B.
A second. Oh, sorry, Jeff. Either way.
Well, we have a motion by Councilman McEntee, second by Councilwoman Rose. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? Very good. That motion carries unanimously. Good luck to those Rams. Keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
All right. That brings us to item 7, which is a public hearing. 7A, a public hearing relative to adoption of the proposed FY 2022/2023 to FY 2027/2028 capital improvement program, as shown on Exhibit 1 attached to the agenda. Terry, do you want to take us through this briefly?
Thank you, Council President. I'd also ask, oh, never mind, here's our Finance Director. Just very briefly, I will share my screen for a moment. And what you're seeing here is just a couple of slides from the original capital improvement program work session. You also have as an attachment Exhibit 1, which has a little more detail in terms of the items within each one of these categories, but just very broadly, as you are aware, the capital improvement program gets rolled into the overall annual budget for the next fiscal year. It is focused on equipment as well as infrastructure improvements to the town in a variety of, obviously, variety of priorities and departments. Many different projects, both single-year funding and then also a long-term funding program. So what you'll see on this screen is the annual funding element proposed for FY 22-23 for a total of $4,309,086 in FY 22-23. The general fund program is the largest program here, you'll see here, and that has about a 1.9% increase over the current funding in FY 21-22. Senior services, you'll see, is increased by 10,000. The Neighborhood Guild, which is self-funded, is showing 1.1 million, and that is including the $1 million bond that will go towards major infrastructure improvements to the Neighborhood Guild in the next year or two. We have the Water Enterprise Fund and the Wastewater Enterprise Funds, which are also self-sustaining, and both of those programs are detailed here with we've got an increase in the Water Enterprise Fund, a significant increase there to address a number of projects that are upcoming in the next year. And then also, finally, we have the School Fund, which is proposed for $621,586. And then we have, I can change the slide here. Our 6-year plan, you can see, also reflects about a $7 million increase. Again, most of that is through the school program, which was detailed out at their public information session earlier this month. And overall, the proposed 6-year program for 22-23 is $121,422,285, and inclusive of that is bond funding earmarked in the amount of $86,160,000. Again, you'll recall that those are 2 major bonding infusions for potential school projects in the out years. And that is, we can get into detail unless you want to do public comments first, Council President. If there are any questions? And I can stop sharing.
Well, I'll begin by asking if there are any comments or questions from council members. Councilwoman Bergman.
Thank you, Abel. A little slow with the Zoom. Haven't been here in a while. So Terry, in the original CIP meeting, we had, there was a truck that was budgeted, but then pushed out and then rebudgeted. So you and I did speak about this, and would you want to share what you're proposing to do instead?
Sure. So there was a question with regard to $39,000 that was or is proposed for a truck within the public services budget. That $39,000 was budgeted in the current fiscal year as well. And what, you know, it's up to the council. what I would propose, if the council felt that they wanted to reallocate that 39,000 in funding to another equipment project, that could be accelerated, and maybe in need of acceleration, based on the need. One possibility would be the senior van, which is proposed for 3 funding infusions. This is the first year of $40,000, then the 2 subsequent years for $40,000, or the animal control van, which also is a multi-year funding proposal. Either of those projects are potentials for, accelerating based on the need. I think you'll note that in the CIP narrative, the senior van is I think it's a 2011 van, and that's the new one. There's also a 2003 backup van. Something for the council to consider if they prefer not to have that 39,000 for capital reserve in the Public Services Department.
Councilwoman Kelson?
So what we would be doing, that 39,000 was going to be put in, or is put in the, I call it the equipment savings account, right? So when it's not spent, it goes into this equipment savings account. So we're just not going to put that there. We're going to put it towards something else. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, essentially, it's still in the capital equipment reserve fund, but it's dedicated to a different piece of equipment.
Okay, so we're going to pull the $39,000 out of the capital equipment fund and put it towards one of the projects. But that's what you're proposing, one of the senior van, that kind of thing.
Essentially, it's still a piece of equipment, so it's not even coming out of really, and Zach, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it essentially remains as part of the equipment reserve. And when we say reserve, it's not all reserve. Those are dedicated, much of those funds are dedicated to particular pieces of equipment. So yes, it would still be dedicated.
So it's like a layaway. We keep putting money on into the account, and we will eventually pay. We'll withdraw the funds to buy something.
Correct. That's correct.
They're just accelerating $39,000
in the one particular equipment piece, the senior van, right?
Okay. All right. Got it.
Any other questions from council members? All right, seeing none. Councilwoman Berger.
Thank you. Sorry. So we have a couple of options, right? We could reduce the spending. We could shift the spending to the senior van or to the animal control van, correct? So those are the options. I understand that. My question is, the equipment reserve fund isn't a savings account for layaway. Really, it's for those larger purchases to save over time for those purchases. But there is excess funding there, for when you estimate something's going to cost 100,000 and it comes in at 85, that 15,000 remains in that account. And so what I'm learning based on the memo that was given to all of us is that there is some money that's earmarked, but there is some money that's extra overages that is there. So that, coupled with a very large fund balance, undesignated fund of 18 million, we really are creating a very large savings account and then another one, on a smaller parallel track. But I don't believe that's the intention of the reserve fund, is to develop a secondary savings, because, and I hear the memo, read the memo and hear the feedback, well, for an emergency, but that's what that $18 million is also, we tell people for. So we have an emergency fund and we have a second fund. So I just want to be mindful that we have two separate ways to deal with an emergency, and we don't want to create a second, for lack of a better word, small slush fund from the equipment reserve fund some is earmarked, absolutely, but not all of it is. So I think people need to be aware of that. I don't think that the senior van or the animal control van, they shouldn't be funded. They should be, but we shouldn't be doing it that way. So I'm trying to also figure out when things don't get purchased and they get pushed out another year, how do we know that? Does, should the council be updated quarterly or twice a year about where things stand with these projects? Because you're just trying to not, we're not, we didn't know that the original truck wasn't bought until we have the CIP again. So I'm just trying to prevent some of that, also to provide more information and understanding to everybody. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I understand. I think in the memorandum that the council received with regard to the rationale for the capital equipment reserve fund and the balance that exists that is unassigned, there is a rationale for a certain amount to be held so that if there is an overage or a piece of equipment costs more, or there's an unexpected need for purchasing a piece of equipment, that there is some cushion to be able to pull from that is not committed to other equipment. So that's Zach. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that.
Yeah, that's correct. So the goal is to try to maintain an appropriate balance so that if something comes in over budget, the balance stays there. That's the point of a multi-year fund. If something comes in under budget, over budget, you have the flexibility to still execute that purchase of equipment, because many of these pieces are multi-year funded. So, pricing today can shift 5 years from now when we actually go to execute that purchase could be very different. So having the flexibility of a fund balance over the years, dating back to, I think you can recall in the memo I provided, there were year-end transfers that were provided that were put into, one, help keep the balance in an appropriate mix and try to fund towards, priority projects that haven't risen to the level of a high priority or a need for the town. Councilwoman Bergner, you're correct in that there is an unassigned fund balance there, for an emergency or just an ordinary purchase that, we didn't have enough funding for because we missed the estimate. Use of unassigned fund balance from the general fund for those types of purchases are typically not recommended for from an accounting perspective or from a rating agency. They don't want to see you go to your unassigned fund balance to make smaller purchases when we have an established multi-year fund set up. One of the things the rating agencies did like about the town is that we have a robust capital improvement plan with many funds that are identified, and we've tried to map it out as best we can over a 6-year period. So I would, at the same time, yes, there is a reserve balance, but if a big ticket item should go and we need to replace it, and you could in that fund. So keep in mind the capital equipment replacement fund is not just public services, it's all equipment for the town that we purchased. It moves through this. So you could reassign or reallocate some of that balance that's been from an accounting or bookkeeping standpoint earmarked for public services. That could be reassigned, whether you need it for EMS, whether you need it for recreation. It provides you the flexibility to move it within the program too. So not just in public works, but also for all of the programs that fall into the SURF, which is essentially every piece of equipment that the town or major piece of equipment that the town has would go through that. So yes, it's from a bookkeeping standpoint, it's under public works right now, but that doesn't mean if something came up in one of the other departments that we could come to you and ask you for approval to make a recommendation to reassign that to help, if it was EMS or something for a rescue or recreation with a large ticket item, we could come to you for that. And it's easier than having to take it from the general fund and assign it out to a multi-year capital fund.
Thank you, Zach. Councilman McEntee.
Terry, so if we wanted to use the freed up $39,000 toward the animal control vehicle or the senior van, would that require an amendment to the capital improvement plan tonight?
The council would have to make that note in any resolution that's passed if they're authorizing the capital budget, that it would shift that amount from the public services allocation to the senior services or the public safety allocation or equipment reserve fund.
Got it. So Zaxel, I got a question for you. This leads me to this. So anytime that the council takes action to commit monies toward a certain capital expenditure, and it has to be used in that certain way, unless there's a council vote subsequently to redirect that towards a different use. Is that correct? Essentially, it's committed, can't be uncommitted unless a subsequent vote commits it elsewhere or uncommits it. Is that correct?
So that correct. I mean, if you recall, when we provide you, when we go out to purchase in the memos, the memo will always have a funding source. And if need be, we've gone to you in the past and asked you to reassign funds from one project to another. I believe, Terry, it was the surf rake and the tractor that had to use for that last year. We came to the council and said, we'd like to reassign projects that we had out that were already committed, and asked for you to allow us to reassign it so we could purchase the surf rake. So the capital improvement plan, when you pass this, when you adopt this, and then ultimately gets adopted in the budget, we assign all the projects that were listed in the plan to those funds with that. If something changes, we would come back to you and ask for that request to make a change. Or if something happened during the year and you had a question and wanted to, reassign an appropriation, you could ask us for that information. We can provide that.
So anytime that there's a capital expenditure sort of planned that doesn't occur, that money cannot be used freely. It has to come back to the council for them to decide how to commit the monies at that point, or change commitment of the use of the monies.
That's correct. So if there was a project that was decided not to be pursued by the town, or a piece of equipment that was decided not to be purchased by the town, if we wanted to use those funds to do something else with it, we would need to come back to you as the council to allow us to pursue whatever project we needed to take on.
Understood. Terry, so in my opinion, it would be prudent to accelerate the 39,000 toward the animal control vehicle or the senior van. What is your recommendation?
Well, I think the senior van has been in the pipeline for several years. And it's been pushed out because there have been other priorities within the senior services program that have taken up the funding. So my recommendation would be to accelerate the senior van funding so that it would basically get just about double what it would have this year, and then there will be one more funding source from the 23-24 year, with the hopes that the van could be purchased at that time.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions at the council level? Councilwoman Kelson.
So what happens to the truck?
So the funding for that truck was approved in the 21-22 fiscal year. So that's there when Public Services is ready to purchase that, to go out to bid for that truck. I know John did mention that it was deferred. They could have purchased it last year, or no, the current year, right? So then they push it out. So they have funding for that truck in the current year.
Right, but funding was not used, right?
That's correct. So it's in the bank, so to speak, for that.
So when it's time to purchase the truck, are the funds freely available, or does that have to come back to the council?
They're available.
Okay.
They've been allocated, and you'll notice, I'm sure you've noticed in these memos, when those purchases take place, department heads will almost every time put the CIP budget from FY whatever has allocated a certain amount of funds for the purchase of this piece of equipment. If that's not there, then there's some other request for reallocation of funds from another project. That's where the council will see the budget source for that equipment or these projects.
That's great. I just don't want to harm the truck at the expense of, another project. So, okay, got it.
All right, any final questions from council members? All right, with that, this is a public hearing, so let's open it up to the floor. For anybody watching on Zoom, you can click that little hand icon to raise your hand to speak. I'll take folks in the order that they raise their hands. If you're calling in, you just hit *9 to raise your hand, and then when we bring you into the meeting, *6 to unmute yourself. First, we have Greg Sweet. All right, Greg, you are in the meeting. If you just unmute yourself, we should be able to hear you.
Gonna take a while to get used to that again. I want to talk a little bit about the American Rescue Plan. I think it was July or August of this past year. It was proposed different projects throughout the town. That was never voted on, was it?
We did vote on that supplemental budget, yes.
So all those proposed fluff and buffs of the town is what is approved?
Well, no, and we'll actually be sort of addressing this on a future agenda item in this meeting. But basically, we passed a framework budget. The specific projects that the rescue plan funding is going to go towards hasn't been identified yet. There's going to be a much more rigorous sort of application process for, applying for those grants. We're going to have a consultant to review and help bring, those projects to a planning stage where the town can hopefully take action on them. So at this point, the funding has been identified for certain uses. We still haven't identified the specific projects that it'll go to.
Because unless I missed it, and I certainly could have, it does not look like, as an example, the water problems that South Kingstown has, that any of that was addressed in that 9 million?
That's correct.
Or any potential sewer problems, that any upgrades or anything like that? None of that is addressed either?
Not as it's currently envisioned.
Do you have figures to look at to see what, I'll use water again as the example, what it would take to correct the water problem in South Kingstown?
I believe John did have a figure for us on a number of those infrastructure upgrade projects. Off the top of my head, I don't remember it, but in any case, it's not part of this capital improvement program, which is the purpose of this public hearing. So Greg, if you want to tailor comments towards the CIP, that would be in order.
Oh, okay, I thought we could talk about what was talked about in tonight's meeting. Is that coming later?
Yeah, we'll have comments for.
Oh, okay, I apologize. Sorry about that. I'll come back and talk later about this then.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else who would like to make a comment about the capital improvement program for this current fiscal year and the 5 years following? All right, I see no takers. Any comments from council members at this point, or do I hear a motion to close the public hearing? Councilwoman Bergner?
Yeah, before we close the public hearing, I just wanted to thank all the town departments and department heads for putting together the budget. I know it's a ton of hard work and a lot of time goes into it. I just wanted to recognize that I always feel like we just need to be mindful of the community's tax dollars. You know, just because we have a little extra money doesn't mean we should always go out and spend it. And I take it very seriously because it really is someone else's money and somebody else is making decisions. You know, we're making decisions for other people. So when I ask a question, it comes from the point of view that we are spending someone else's money. So we've had an extra $40,000 because the truck that was budgeted for was budgeted a second time. We don't necessarily have to spend it. We don't, you know, we're looking to accelerate a project that wasn't even identified as a project to be funded in this CIP. So I just want everyone to hear, just because we ended up with 40,000 extra, we don't have to choose to spend it at all as well. I think that's important to think about. We don't we're going to accelerate a project that was not identified by department heads to accelerate. So there's that. And again, just because there's that equipment reserve fund, that's where those overages go. And if you look at that memo, you know, 60-something% is identified of over $1 million, and 32% is that extra. So we're creating a savings account that grows. So it's just not our money. It's the community's money. People work very hard and have other choices and bills to pay. And we should always be mindful that we're just doing the best by the community that we serve. That's all.
Thank you. Are there any other comments, motions?
I'll move to close the public hearing.
Second.
And we have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion? Is there anyone opposed to this motion? All right, that motion carries unanimously. Do I hear a motion on 7A? And again, seeking clarification on where we might want to amend it.
Rory McEntee, I'll make a motion to approve 7A with the amendment reflecting that the 39,000 that was freed up from the public services truck not purchased to be allocated toward the acceleration of a purchase in a senior van.
Second.
So moved. Discussion. All right, you know, I do think this reallocation makes sense. I did hear when senior services came up to present to us during the CIP about this van replacement, and it sounds like it does need to be done, and it's nice to be able to accelerate that purchase with this, you know, windfall. So I'll be happy to support that amendment. All right, is there anyone opposed to this motion? All right, that motion carries unanimously. That brings us to communications. Communication B is a letter dated January 11th, 2022 from the Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management relative to the Land and Water Conservation Fund Program, compliance and property stewardship. That has been received, placed on file. We did talk a bit about this in the work session. Terry, what would we like to do with it now?
Did you want me to explain that a little bit, Council President?
Well, we could either have a motion, or if you want to explain it again, that would be fine.
Just very briefly, it was a communication from the Department of Environmental Management related to the Land and Water Conservation Act funding, which municipalities across the state have received over many decades in order to enhance park properties. It's a reminder to all cities and towns that if they have received funds and there are properties related to those funds, they've provided us with that listing. We have several locations in town that have benefited from the grant funding from DEM and the federal government over the many decades. And they will be holding a workshop on reminding municipalities of the commitment that they take in terms of conserving park property if they receive funding from the federal government through the Land and Water Conservation Act. Our staff will be attending that workshop on February 10th.
Do I hear?
I'll make a motion. Yeah, I'll make a motion to refer item 8B to the town manager's office.
Second.
So moved. Any further discussion? Anyone opposed? All right, that motion carries unanimously as well. And that brings us to comments from interested citizens, item 9. So anyone, again, who is watching on their Zoom can just click on the hand to raise their hand to be called on in order. If you are on your phone, you just hit *9 and that will raise your hand. All right, Greg Sweet. All right, Greg, there you go.
Yeah, try it again. Are you guys going to consider a water project or a sewer project in that $9 million? Or will it be brought to at least public discussion?
Typically, of course, during comments from interested citizens, we don't have a give and take conversation, Greg. In this instance, I'll just answer quickly. We've passed that budget. It has identified sources. I think at the time we were debating it, some of the thought was that, there's a pending infrastructure bill, which did end up passing, which might have money for projects like water resources, water treatment, and make use of those funds for that type of need here. Whereas the rescue plan was really geared towards a lot of economic development, and we tried to identify, buckets within that more than with the infrastructure as it happened. All right, go on.
All right, so no water or sewer will be part of this rescue plan, I guess, and doesn't sound like much infrastructure is actually going to be part of this. So I thank you.
No problem. Any other public comment? All right, Councilwoman Bergner, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I do think that maybe responding to Greg Sweet in a little bit of a different way could be helpful. I mean, the EMS project was not originally identified on the rescue plan funds. We were going in another direction. Then when we got an alternate location that could work, we moved to use rescue funds to cover that project cost. So I would say to Greg that it's not that it wouldn't happen. I think that if residents are interested in other projects and want other priorities, they could certainly raise those issues to the council, and and they would at least be listened to. I don't think that citizens have zero say in spending the $9 million. We did have multiple meetings in the summer, but it doesn't mean that those buckets, and really we discussed it in broad terms of buckets and not really in detail, couldn't be adjusted. So I would not dissuade any resident who had feedback about a project or other projects to be taken up to not speak at a council meeting in the future. So I don't know if Greg is still here, but I would encourage anybody who has another idea to continue to speak up, because they would not want to deny people from democratically choosing how we spend the money.
Other comments from council members? All right. Deb, I think that that's a good point. And, as this, ARP sort of funding progresses and we really get into spending it, every time, this consultant comes forward with a project that's been developed and proposed, many of which I do think will have infrastructure components, because that is part of what we identified with the spending. That will have to be voted on by the council to approve that. So in every one of those circumstances, there's going to be opportunities for public input on, the proposals that are coming forward, whether we want to support them as a council. A big move from, say, sort of the strategy that we identified to, just a couple big infrastructure projects. We can have that as a bigger conversation at some point if we want to revisit it. Hopefully, again, with something like the water resources, there is going to be other opportunities to find funding to do that. All right, that brings us to the town manager's report.
Yes, a few items to bring to your attention. One, on item E on the town manager's report notes that there is a memo from the Harbor Master and Natural Resources Officer with regard to a grant award from DEM for replacement of a marine pump out facility at Marina Park. That requires, I believe it's less than $3,000 commitment on the town's part for the replacement of this marine pump out, which is located at Ram Point Marina, but is in fact a town facility and available to all boaters. So we're pleased to be able to be receiving in excess of $18,000 for that item this year. So that project should be taking place within the next 5 months. I'd also like to make note of item L, which was the press release related to the COVID-19 rapid test kit distribution. As the council is aware, the town did receive a disbursement of COVID-19 at-home test kits from the state, and that was last Thursday. Our EMS department did pick up the distribution. We received 4,680 test kits with 2 per kit, so just over 9,000 total tests. And those were distributed to nursing homes, senior housing within South Kingstown, the school department community, and as of today, they are being distributed to the 65 plus population. Residents who are 65 or older can receive an at-home test kit, and they are being distributed out of the senior center. That started today at 9 a.m. and I believe approximately 400 kits were distributed today. So we do anticipate future disbursements from the state in the coming weeks. However, we have not been advised when that will be. And as the town does receive those kits, eligibility requirements will broaden so that we can include more of the resident population to be able to take advantage of the free test kits. On another note, I am aware that the state testing sites, in particular at South Road School, does have ample appointments available. The state did change vendors in terms of who is now doing the testing at South Road School, and there are more appointments available, and the turnaround time is much quicker for test results. So something just to be aware of. And then also there was a question related to the South Kingstown Land Trust land offer for purchase to the town, which was for the EMS facility. The town council authorized entering into a purchase and sales agreement contingent upon due diligence surrounding the property at a cost of $10,000. There was a question with regard to why $10,000? And essentially the land trust offered the property for a price. Typically, all of their property is restricted and they do not have the ability to even consider selling the land, obviously, that they're conserving. But in this regard, this particular parcel was not restricted. And in the Land Trust Board unanimously voted in favor of being able to offer to sell a portion to the town. $10,000 would allow them to have a transaction for the property so that the town could own the property, and then the funding that the town expends on it would be placed in their stewardship program to steward all of the other conserved land that they have. One of the pieces of the Land Trust's mission is to ensure that not only that they're able to take property and conserve it, but that they have a plan in place to steward the land over the many decades to come, so that it's in perpetuity. So that is the reason for the price tag on the land for the EMS building, rather than they were considering it potentially an easement, but this allows the town to actually enter into a purchase and sales and own that piece of the parcel located on Ministerial Road. Unless there's any other questions from the council, I have nothing further.
Any questions for Terry? One question, Terry. I mean, you mentioned it briefly, the testing at South Road. There's lots of appointments available. Hopefully that's also indicative that less people are feeling the need to go and get tested. The Omicron wave seems to be have crested and now gone by a little bit. Do you have any sort of metrics that you're going to be using to help decide whether we should go back to in-person meetings? When do I guess that's also a conversation for the council as a whole, but
yeah, we generally will use the state, obviously the state data that comes out from DOH. That's generally a week behind when you're getting a full picture of testing versus number of cases versus hospitalizations. I can certainly present the council with a snapshot. I believe Tuesdays are when the state updates that data. We are also waiting to know whether the governor will determine whether or not to extend the Open Meetings Act, the executive order allowing the Open Meetings Act to allow for remote attendance and participation in public meetings, and also the extension of the I believe it's the emergency declaration as well. So we expect to hear something within it's got to be by February 4th. That's when the executive order related to open meetings, remote participation expires.
Thank you. If there are no other questions for Terry, town solicitors report.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to bring you up to date on where Municipal Resources, Inc., our manager search consultants, are as of this point. As you recall from your last meeting, they advised us that there were 20 applicants. They decided that of those 20 applicants, that 10 of them were of the caliber that they should send out the essay questions to, 4 essay questions. Of the 10 that they sent the essay questions out to, 7 responded. Of those 10, they felt that 8 of the candidates were in what they would call the top tier, who could actually do the job. Of the 3 who did not respond out of those 10, 1 of those was part of the 8 that they felt were in the top tier. That person withdrew because they told them that it just wouldn't fit with their plan, so to speak. 1 of the 3 that didn't respond actually got another job somewhere else. and one of them just didn't respond. So they obviously weren't interested. So the next step is that they're in the process of grading each of the essays, and they will be conducting phone interviews thereafter. They will then compile all this information for you. They will be providing you with the names of the applicants, their resumes, their cover letters, the essays, their comments on the essays, and their comments on the phone interviews, all to be discussed with you at a meeting to take place the week of February 7th. I know that Colleen sent around a couple of possible dates, Tuesday, February 8th, and Thursday, February 10th. So tonight or now, we hopefully will decide what date works best for the council. They anticipate that that would be about a 3-hour meeting. Can be done by Zoom. They have to be done by Zoom, but we'll know a little bit about that as we get closer to February 4th. But that is basically the update from our consultants.
Thank you, Mike. Rory.
Mike, just a quick question there. Is that correct? It has to be on Zoom, or do we have the discretion? Can we have it in person if we'd like?
Yeah, you can have it in person if you like, absolutely.
Okay, great.
It's going to be a closed executive session, and all of the individuals will be told that basically through the appropriate notice. If you had it in person, we would simply have to open it up in person at the town hall or wherever we're going to have the meeting. And the public does not have to be invited in. There would have to be Zoom credentials, but it would simply be for the opening and the closing. It would not be for the meeting. But again, as we get closer, I'll get a memo out to you on those options. Is your preference, is it the council's preference to do this in person? Because I'll let them know that if that's the case.
That's my preference, and either date you mentioned works for me.
Everyone's shaking their head, I can see on the Zoom. So I will let Bob and Buzz know that the meeting will be in person, most likely in the council chambers. And is everyone good with February 8th? Tuesday, the 8th? Again, I see everyone shaking their head, yes. All right, I'll let them know it'll be February 8th, and Susan will post the meeting appropriately.
Thank you. All right, any other questions for Mike? Oh, Councilwoman Burton.
Mike, do you think that we could get just the questions that were asked of the candidates ahead of time? I know we had discussed it.
Yeah.
When we met with MRI, and then they were like, we don't want to give you answers to the test ahead of time, but now that they've taken the test, could we get the questions?
What I will certainly circle back with them. One thing I didn't mention is they're obviously going to get all this information to you ahead of time. So you will not be reviewing it on Tuesday night for the first time. I believe their goal is to get it to you by Thursday or Friday of the weekend before. So again, you'll have the opportunity to look at it all. And I will circle back with Bob on the actual essay questions too, Deb.
Just the actual questions, not the answers.
Yeah, understood.
Seeing no other questions for Mike, we'll move on to appointments. Item
12. Rory McEntee, I'll make an appointment of a resolution, appointing Ken Burke to the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? All right, that motion carries unanimously.
Jess Rose, I'd like to make a resolution appointing George Helwig to the Affordable Housing Collaborative.
I'll second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? Very good. That motion carries unanimously.
And we have one more, I think, appointing Sue Barrett to the 300th Anniversary Committee.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion, second by Councilwoman Bergner. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? All right, that motion carries unanimously. That brings us to new business, item 13. 13A is a resolution authorizing the establishment of a 300th anniversary fund to support the development and implementation of programs for a year-long celebration of the town's 300th anniversary of incorporation in 2023. Further authorizing the transfer of $10,000 from the Town Council Contingency Fund to the newly established 300th Anniversary Fund. Further described in a memorandum from the interim town manager to the Town Council dated January 9th.
Rory McEntee, I'll make a motion to approve 13A.
I'll second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Is there any discussion? Is there anyone opposed? All right, that motion carries unanimously. 13B is a resolution authorizing the planning department to submit an application for the Rhode Island Historical Preservation and Heritage Commission for a certified local government grant for the SKHDC to host a statewide Historic District Commission training camp. The application proposes a project budget of $14,000 and $10,500 in federal grant aid provided by the RAHPHC, matched with $3,500 of in-kind services provided by the town. Further described in a memo from the senior planner to the interim town manager dated January 8th.
Council President, may I
Sure.
make a notation? I'm noticing in the resolution, the grant application total is actually $15,750. If the council considers authorizing this resolution, I'd just make that correction to the resolution. The final application went in at $15,750.
I've brought in Brian Wagner to answer your questions on this.
And anybody have any questions for Brian or motion?
So in the application, what's the breakdown in our fiscal responsibility?
I don't think I got all of that, but if you're asking about the town's responsibility here fiscally, there's no out-of-pocket cost. It'll be in-kind contributions from staff and members of the Historic District Commission in basically organizing and setting up the training session.
Did that answer your question, Deb?
Still estimating the in-kind contribution to be $3,500? Or is
Yes.
that where the increase is?
No, the increase came from a couple of things. After getting some estimates, we raised the cost for the food a bit. We raised the cost for a venue space. One of the places we were looking at is the Welcome Center at URI, simply because that puts the meeting right there in the Kingston Historic Village. So we thought that was one option we wanted to look at. And the other thing that we added, which was $1,000 potential upcharge, was that the National Alliance for Preservation Commissions had an option for hybrid meeting over Zoom that was an extra $1,000. Hopefully come next fall when we want to do this, COVID will be in our past, but I've said that before and it hasn't happened. So we added that to the grant application as a just in case, and hopefully that's not something we have to make use of.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Bergen.
Ryan, just a quick question. Was quickly looking through the grant application again. How many people will be participating in this grant?
We are planning on 60 total attendees. There are 18 historic district commissions across the state. So you're looking at, maybe 3 people.
Mhm.
And, we're hoping to attract Historic District Commission members as well as staff or planning board members or zoning board members, anybody that might have a role in these kinds of decisions.
The only reason why I asked was when you mentioned the Welcome Center, I know that might hold 100 or so, but then we had been in the upstairs of the Kingston Library, which is also a fantastic historical building in the village. I didn't know if that was too small. It might be too small for your.
I've never been in that meeting space. Is it something that could handle, 60 people?
I'm not sure. I wasn't in there with 60, but it could be a good breakout room if you use both of them. I don't know what your plans are, but there's that upstairs room.
I know that the HDC chair, Richard Youngkin, is familiar with that space. The fact that he hasn't brought it up suggests to me that maybe it is a little small. One of our other alternatives is the land trust barn down in Matunic, which would also give us plenty of room for breakout sessions and whatnot.
I just thought of that space when you said in the historical village of Kingston. So
yeah, well, we'll consider it. I'll talk to Richard about it.
Do I hear a motion on 13B?
Jess Rose, I'll make a motion to approve 13B.
I'll second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? All right, that motion carries unanimously. 13C is a resolution authorizing the South County Art Association to submit an application to the Rhode Island Historical Preservation and Heritage Commission for a certified local government grant to investigate moisture infiltration issues at the association's buildings at 2579 Kingstown Road. The association's application proposes a project budget of $10,000, $9,000 in federal grant aid provided by the RIHPHC, matched with $1,000 of cash and in-kind services provided by the association. This authorization is granted with the understanding that no financial or in-kind support is requested from or required from the town, further described in a memo from the senior planner to the interim town manager dated January 18th.
Lori McEntee, I'll make a motion to approve 13C.
I'll second.
So moved. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? All right, that motion carries unanimously. 13E is the nomination and election of officers of the town council for the remainder of this term. I'll just say that I requested this item and after thinking about it a lot over the last couple of years, I've decided not to run for town council again. Obviously, you cannot plan exactly what's going to happen in an election, but I think in the best interest of the town, it'd be good to have other people having spent time as president of our council. So have a continuity of leadership in some respects. So that's my thought process. It has been a great honor to serve as a president for a number of councils, and it's been fun working with all of you. I will, of course, continue to work with you as not the president. With that in mind, I guess, Susan, you can take over now.
Thank you, April. So this item of business requires me to ask for nominations for president of the town council. This will be for the remainder of this term until November of 2022. There is no debate on nominations. So I ask, do I hear any nominations for president of the town council? Abel, you were first.
Yeah, I would. It's my pleasure to nominate Rory McEntee as president of the town council.
I'll second.
Thank you. There's no need for seconds on nominations. Do I hear any other nominations for president of the town council? Okay, hearing no further nominations are declared closed. And we will now vote on the nomination before us. All those in favor of Rory McEntee as president of the town council for the remainder of this term until November of 2022, signify by saying aye. If you
Aye.
are opposed, signify by saying nay. And I'm going to take a roll call vote on this. Councilwoman Bergner,
Aye.
Councilman Collins,
Aye.
Councilwoman Kelso,
Aye.
Councilman McEntee,
Aye.
Councilwoman Rose,
Aye.
okay. Rory McEntee is elected president of the town council by a unanimous vote. Congratulations.
Thank you, Susan. So Mike, at this time, I'll move forward to accepting nominations for the vice president. Is that right?
That's correct.
That is correct.
Do I hear any?
And I will again take a roll call vote on that once you make your nominations.
Deb Kelso?
I'd like to nominate Abel Collins as the vice president.
Do I hear any other nominations at this time? It appears not. Susan, at this point, you can take the roll.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Bergner,
Aye.
Councilman Collins,
Aye.
Councilwoman Kelso,
Aye.
Councilman McEntee,
Aye.
Councilwoman Rose,
Aye.
okay. Abel Collins is elected vice president of the town council for the remainder of this term by a unanimous vote. Congratulations, Abel.
Thank you, Susan. Before we move on, I would just like to acknowledge, thank, and express my gratitude toward the members here. Receiving unanimous support is important to me on this, and I appreciate, Abel, your willingness to step aside and give someone else an opportunity here. And I think, obviously, your 7 years of council president leadership is institutional knowledge that we appreciate of you, and I'm happy that you're willing to step aside and give the opportunity. And but with that said, it's certainly a privilege to be able to be president and lead the meetings. But considering that, there is no higher power that the president has above any other members. We are all equal, and I intend to respect that notion. So thank you again for your nominations and support, and I look forward to the rest of this term leading this council. With that said, we'll move on to 13F, which is a resolution authorizing an award of contract to Weston and Sampson of Foxborough Boulevard, Foxborough, Mass. For professional consulting services related to the American Rescue Plan Act, Local Fiscal Recovery Fund, in an amount not to exceed $492,800, including a $20,000 contingency as detailed in the amendment proposal as further described in a memorandum from the interim town manager to the town council dated January 19, 2022. Terry, you gave us a pretty good rundown as to this in the work session. If you could sort of reiterate that or give a little summary of that here so the public can be aware of it as well.
Of course. In September, the town went out to bid for a wide range of consulting services based on the framework for the American Rescue Plan fund spending that the council approved in August, I believe. So as noted in the program, the first component of being able to execute and ensure proper planning of the variety of projects and initiatives within the rescue plan program is securing a contract with experienced firm that has specialty in a number of different areas, including project development and management, and also financial management background, grant management, a deep bench, so to speak, in terms of professional abilities to help move the town forward with executing the American Rescue Plan projects. The RFP went out in October. The town received 3 proposals, and of the 3 proposals, there was one found to be much more detailed and focused on the South Kingstown framework that was established, and that was Weston and Sampson. They also proposed 3 subcontractors within their proposal, including architectural design, financial management, and grant management, so that as we move forward with the rescue plan execution, we have all of the regulatory requirements met in terms of reporting, in terms of time frame. There were several focus areas that were presented in the RFP that this vendor addressed in a detailed description of how they would execute the services that would put the town in a position to move forward with the economic recovery on Main Street, both the public plan and the public-private partnership with the village businesses. It also focused on grants management in terms of the social service grants that the council had authorized funding for, and also a financial management and monitoring component that would allow for the town to be assured that every regulation was met, no reporting deadlines were missed, that we are following pretty stringent guidelines in terms of how the government requires us to spend these dollars. And in light of all of that, professional services in this area for these $8.9 million is something that the town, it would behoove the town to invest in, so that we're not held up in a 2-year time frame for actually committing these funds. And I also have we have a representative from Weston and Sampson with us this evening. I also have John Chalk, Public Services Director, and Jamie Rabbit, Planning Director here. The 2 of them, myself and our Finance Director, were part of the review committee in terms of determining this recommendation, and it is pared down from the original proposal, and that's what's presented to you this evening.
Great, thank you, Terry. I feel pretty good about the information we've been presented here. If anyone else would like to hear further from Planning Department, John Shock, or anyone else, just sort of raise your hand and let us know. If not, do I hear a motion on 13F?
Rory, I would like to make a motion in light of the fact that we are so close to securing a new town manager, for continuity's sake, and to have someone on board with this from the get-go. I would like to make a motion to table this until we know where we're at with the town manager search. I just wouldn't want to start this and then have to backtrack and catch up a new town manager. I think that, we do have that 2-year window. So is another month really going to affect that?
Understood. Any other council members feel similarly or want to express their thoughts?
I would second that motion. One, for that, we have the search we're basically in the middle of the search, but also just providing a little bit more information about what the projects are, what we would be doing. Clearly, the public still wants to have some input if it was possible. I think we need to prioritize what projects before we hire a consultant to sort of work on the projects, to sort of say, like, at maybe a work session that before we move forward and commit to spending $500,000. I mean, we're spending $500,000 and we don't know, we heard a few projects, but I'd like to have a better sense of what's in the scope of projects that they'd be working on. I'm not quite sure if the projects are actually in any approved CIPs that we're accelerating or we're creating new projects. So I think for what Jess said, as well as to get a better handle on our own confidence to articulate to the community what we spent $500,000 on would be helpful to me. So I would second to table it for at least a month.
So Mike, Terry, our intention is to have a new town manager by March 1st. What's the impact if we table this till the first meeting in March?
I'm going to let Terry address the issue about the putting the consultant off. I just want to clarify that although you may be hiring a new manager by March 1st, I don't believe that person will be filling Terry's seat. I know they won't be filling Terry's seat by March 1st. So it's probably a little bit longer than a month. It's probably more like 6 weeks to 7 weeks.
I also feel that even if we approve this now, the administration of the monies would be happening while Terry would be assisting the new permanent town manager. So there would be sort of an adjustment period that would allow for a smooth transition if we decided to go that route tonight. Deb Kelso.
So it's my understanding that the firm is going to help us identify those projects. That's part of the scope of their work. To let us know what the cost and the implications of those projects are. I also don't believe that this is the town manager's funds. This is a conglomeration, an amalgamation of departments across the board who put their ideas into this project. So I don't see this as town manager proprietary. I see it as town manager administered. And if I'm wrong about that firm, please clarify, please correct me. But what I heard was the firm was being hired to help us identify and execute projects. We wouldn't be telling the firm, this is what we want to do. The firm, which we would have to do in the end, is say to the firm, yes, we agree, but they would be bringing the projects to us that we've already identified in our sort of loose scope that we approved.
Terry.
That's correct. So part of the scope of work for this contract is for the consultant to go through a process of vetting the proposed framework, which is the economic recovery, both on the public side and on the public-private partnership side, where they would be walking the town through really looking at these projects, the economic development, the economic recovery in terms of site visits to each village, to have a workshop with staff upon assessing each location, coming back and identifying specific projects that would then be recommended, and the town would ultimately have the decision on whether or not to move forward with those projects that fall under that particular umbrella. So that is correct. There is that piece of this firm really walking the town through the process of looking at the framework and then helping the town to identify what is most viable or most beneficial in moving forward with those particular initiatives or projects.
Thank you, Terry. Abel Collins.
Thanks, Rory. So, I'm okay with moving forward with, approving this item. Obviously, that's not the motion on the table right now. But, I think these two processes can move ahead parallel, the hiring of the town manager and the hiring of this firm. I would be disconcerted, frankly, if, we hired a new town manager and they were all of a sudden, no, I want you to switch to some other consultant firm after we've already gone through the RFP process and vetted, this one and had negotiations, and they've really the only responsive company. And, by all accounts from the staff, they've done a good job when we've worked with them in the past. So, I feel comfortable with this firm. I think, the reason to do it now is to really get this process started. Last, I don't know, August maybe it was, or even a little before then, we had nonprofits coming in to the council and with these proposed projects that they were asking us to help fund. And, we've sort of kept them going. We're trying to identify a consultant who can help manage this grant application process. So now we've finally got an organization that can help us with that work. So I'd like to see us put that in motion.
Deb Bergner.
Thank you, Rory. So to go back, the original proposal submitted by Weston was $1.9 million. Then you had a meeting with them and we scaled it all the way back to $500,000. So things were cut out. And then the way that the memo was written, there's going to be additional costs potentially. It's the last line in the memo. It says, hold on a second. It should be noted that a future additional award of services to Weston and Sampson is expected should their preliminary work be found acceptable, and if or some of all of the 10% concept designs be deemed viable for full engineering, architectural design, and bid-ready specs. So we know that they're going to come back. So this $500,000 in consulting could be much higher. What do we anticipate it could be ballooning to?
Well,
I feel like there's just a lot of questions. I'm sorry, Terry. I just feel like there's just still a lot of questions and I don't necessarily have the right information to take a vote. So that's where I'm at, but go ahead, Terry.
I just wanted to clarify that, the original bid put forth by Weston and Sampson essentially took the entire framework, every item that was on the town's rescue plan proposal prior to the EMS building, and estimated hours that would take us from soup to nuts in terms of from development to execution to construction. And that's assuming, I think it was something like 11,000 hours. So what the town did was we know we're not going to need that type of time from the consulting firm, and going back and having the conversation with them to revise that scope of work to say, look, we have internal resources that if we get to a 10% conceptual design on some of these projects, that may be all we need to then take it and move it forward. We won't need 100% on every item that's listed on that rescue plan. I think John probably did a better job of explaining that earlier, but essentially we would move forward with projects that we may already have specifications and as-built for things that already exist in town that we're proposing be expanded, like lighting, like potential sidewalk design or crosswalk design. So I think that's a clarification of how that initial bid was put out there. I also think that it's typical that a 10% allocation of a project fund, industry standard, goes towards engineering, design, planning. And in this regard, that would be about $800,000. The town identified $300,000 initially in the rescue plan that was proposed to be dedicated to a grant writer and contract manager. In reviewing that, it became clear that the town needed more than just that skill set for being able to move forward with the ambitious plan that's been put out for all of these projects. So that 300,000 was reallocated or redirected so that it could be part of this contract, along with another approximately $500,000, which is about 10% of what is proposed to be spent on the economic recovery of the public-private partnership and the public side of the economic recovery initiatives that were proposed in the project. So that puts us at about a total of $800,000.
Thank you, Terry. At this point, I kind of feel similar to Abel Collins in that because we've developed our framework, I feel comfortable kind of moving forward with this consulting firm for them to establish or develop the projects for which we should implement. But if council members are not comfortable at this time, I'm open to tabling this to the next meeting. And Terry, is it possible we could get a representative from this consulting firm to answer any questions we have?
Yes, actually, we have someone here this evening, but entirely up to you if you'd like for the representative to join you tonight with questions, or you'd rather delay and wait another 2 weeks or month.
Jess Rose, go ahead.
So I'm going to be super honest here. I think you guys probably know I've been sick for several weeks now, and I have not had a chance to get as caught up on this as I would like to be. That's probably, part of my hesitancy here too. So even tabling for a week, just to think about it some more, to have a little bit more time to wrap my head around it before being forced to vote on it, I would appreciate even that, I mean.
All right, here's what I think. I think we should table this till the first meeting in February. Hopefully we can get a representative from the consulting firm to show up at that meeting, gives us a little more time to look this over and formulate questions that we can ask and hopefully get a bigger grasp around this. So there is a motion on the table and there is a second to table it. I guess we could just add to that, Jess, if you could, that we table it to the first meeting in February.
I'll amend my motion to table this item until the first meeting in February.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Anyone opposed?
I have my hand up.
Oh, sorry. Deb,
Sorry, it's okay, because I kept it up. Sorry. I think I'm happy to postpone it, but I don't just want to postpone it for 2 weeks and not get any information. I think I really need like a list of the projects, when we added in EMS, what else, what are the other projects? I remember some of them, but I don't know if we've discarded some of those. I'd like to see, like what we think we're going to work on first, whether it's the park, whether it's, we've said lighting and ornamental sidewalks. I mean, I just want to know what those things are for, and it sounds like now it's going to go up. You've budgeted 10%, 800,000. We have 9 million in rescue funds. We've spent about $1.5 million or earmarked it about $1.5 million already between EMS, the natural resource officer, and some technology. So you're down at 7.5. So just trying to figure out what's left. And so that piece of the portion, I'd just like to have a better understanding so I could explain it to the community if I was asked, because I know I will be asked, because someone's going to say, you spent $500,000 or $800,000 to spend 8 million, and we want to know what the answer is to that, and in a clear way. So I'm happy to table it, but we just need we need to make sure the town staff can pull that information together for us and give it back to us. And I don't know if they can. So that's what I'm asking.
So we know the framework, but we don't know all the details underlying the framework because we haven't hired the consultants to develop the projects within the framework. Terry, is there any, I guess, more detail to that you could provide to us in advance of the next meeting?
I think we could definitely provide an update in terms of the allocation and the recent amendments to the overall spending plan, which includes the EMS facility. And we can work with the consultant to come up with to try to answer as best we can the questions, but and remind everyone of what the framework is. I think that's a piece of this too. We can push out the framework that was established back in August with the public sessions, and give the council an update on that. Show how the financials are allocated or estimated to be allocated, and we can certainly have the consultant available to also speak to how they would execute the job if they were to be hired.
Thank you. Abel Collins.
I wouldn't mind bringing the consultant in since they're here tonight, and we can ask them if they can make it to that next meeting. I'd also say that, it's not the consultant's job to identify the project, so we're not going to get that information from them. I think we're probably not going to have a very detailed idea of all the projects that they're going to be vetting for us by the next meeting. I just don't think we're there yet. I mean, we're hiring this consultant to help us as we go through the process of identifying projects, and we're going to be doing that over the next year and a half. So I just, it would seem like a big burden on our directors of different departments and throwing different ideas out there at this point. So I'm happy to table it if that's what everybody wants. But this is the firm that's been identified by staff as the one that can help us through this process. If we're comfortable with that recommendation from staff, then we should approve it tonight. That's my job.
Thank you, Abel. I'm certainly comfortable moving forward with the consultants, but to accommodate the majority of the council here, I think it's right to table this. Give us an opportunity to sort of look this over a little more and ask questions of the consultants that may come to us. Deb Kelso, go ahead.
So I'm perfectly fine with continuing this until the first meeting in February. If Jess needs time to read the memorandum and all of that, I fully understand that. But at that point, will be in favor of moving forward with this firm. I think we've got a horse cart situation here that we're discussing, and we need the firm to take us to the next step, to put the horse in front of the cart. And no amount of time is going to do that. Whatever firm we have, they're still going to have to vet whatever programs we decide on. We have a pie chart, we have the overview, but I am happy to continue this, to vote to continue this, so Jess gets a chance to do the work she needs to do to be comfortable.
I appreciate that, Deb, thanks.
So at this point, we have a motion and a second. Is there anyone opposed? All right, that motion passes unanimously. That brings us to 13G, which is a resolution authorizing the interim town manager to execute any required agreements and/or documents with the Rhode Island Department of Transportation that are necessary to transfer ownership and maintenance of any and all streetlights on state roads currently owned by the town of South Kingstown to the Rhode Island Department of Transportation, as further described in a memorandum from the Public Services Director to the interim town manager dated January 20, 2022. Terry, can we bring in John Schock here?
Sure.
Hey, John.
Good evening.
You did a great job walking us through this in the work session. And if you want to just kind of
Sure.
do that again here or summarize and
So, as the council may recall, they awarded a contract to Siemens back in 2018 to convert all the streetlights in town on state and town roads to LED technology. That project was delayed for a couple of years due to the town of Johnston, I guess, was in litigation with the DOT, and it was decided that the state would take over streetlights on state roads, provided the community converted them to LED technology first. We have completed that on all state roads. All the streetlights have been converted, as have all the streetlights have been converted on town roads. The state road streetlights are controlled with a photovoltaic cell, essentially on at dusk, off at dawn. However, the town roads, we will have the ability to control those lights, dim them for additional energy savings. That control system has yet to be operable. Unfortunately, as components that are delayed due to COVID, but at least all the streetlights have been changed. And the other remaining work that we have to be done is the decorative lights along Main Street. We're trying to get the correct lamps in order to try to keep those, we call them inverted acorn lights. So, but what's tonight is on the agenda is we're now, as I said, we've completed the conversion of the HPS high pressure sodium to LED. And we're ready to transfer those lights to the DOT, and they require an authorization by the town council to do so. So that's what's before the town council tonight for consideration.
Thank you, John. Do I hear a motion on oh, sorry, go ahead, Abel.
Motion to approve 13G.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? 13G passes unanimously. And that brings us to the end of the agenda.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Anyone opposed? All right, this meeting is adjourned.
Job, Roy.
Good job, Rory.
Thank you all. Appreciate it. See you soon. Have a good night.